If I hadn't decided to take the motorcycle trip from Alaska to South America, I would never have met her. But I did, and as I cruised down that Pan-American highway traveling from Guadalajara to the west coast of Mexico, the oil slick which threw me to the ground as I rounded that mountain bend coming down out of the Sierra Madre Mountains was the last thing in my mind. You know, fate is funny. If the motorcycle and I hadn't been loaded onto the back of that flatbed truck and taken to the village of Santiago, about 150 miles south of Puerto Vallarta, I would never have met Clotilda, or Cody, as I came to call her. The bike, a BMW R60, went to the mechanic shop to repair a smashed cylinder head which I had while I recuperated from a wounded knee, sitting in a hammock by the sea overlooking Santiago Bay. Behind me was the Hotel Casablanca, built by Maria Cristina and her husband, Nate. Maria stood beside me as I watched the gold and purple of the sunset, and she plied me with margaritas and tacos. "Quieres más?" she asked, smiling as she gently swayed the hammock. "Do you want more?" Her large, beautiful brown eyes twinkled with delight, contemplating her plan to introduce me to her little sister the next day. Nate, her husband, was a gringo from New York. He had met Maria while on vacation. Now they were married with 3 kids. "Tomorrow we will go to the hacienda to meet my sister and mis padres, my parents. She's a good girl," she said, and she winked. The hacienda, as I found out the next morning, was a large ranch-style finca with farm and horses, cattle, citrus fruits, bananas, everything overlooking the village. Maria's father, Don Arturo, was the patron or leader of the village. Her mother, Mama Elena, was the head of the church, and the family owned most of the land as far as the eye could see. Well, all of that would become important with time, but at the moment, as I stood in the archway of the grand entrance which opened up to a luxurious garden filled with fruit trees, flowers, and flowing water, I was mesmerized. The woman of my dreams was standing before my eyes. My heart began to race as Nate introduced me to the shy Sophia Loren lookalike. She had been sweeping the patio with a broom. She was wearing white clam diggers, a blue striped short-sleeved shirt, and her angelic face was framed by a Dutch boy-style haircut which highlighted her large gem-like glowing eyes. Wow, I thought, could this be mine? The first hurdle I encountered was her father, Don Arturo, a tall, elegant man with a mustache, a cane, and the receding hairline which was vaguely reminiscent of Don Corleone and The Godfather. He had fought against Pancho Villa, carried a German Luger under his belt, and at the age of 70, looked like the patriarch that he was, quiet but powerful. One glance at his expression told me that I was in trouble. "¿Cuál es su trabajo?" He stared at me with questioning eyes. "What is your work?" I had studied Spanish at the Atlantic City High School for 4 years and then another 4 years at the University of Hawaii, but I still was not conversational. Nate translated for me and explained that I was a writer on assignment with National Geographic and Cycle Guide magazine to tell the story of my trip. I guess he wasn't impressed as I stood before him, also with a cane, hair down on my shoulders, and a long, brown, neatly trimmed beard. "Se ve como un gringo hippie," he explained. "You look like a hippie." 3 days later, I proposed marriage to Cody, and I suggested we run off together on my motorcycle once it was repaired. "He would kill you," she whispered that night as the stars opened up above our heads by the thousands. 10 feet away were her cousin and aunt sitting and quietly playing cards, but watching, always watching. It was the dueña system of guarding the intended prior to marriage, and it was driving me batty. I remember thinking about the woman who had captured my heart as I silently laid in my hammock, weeping quietly, with a realization that I would have to leave and continue on my journey without her. My bike was ready, and I needed to finish the ride and complete my adventure. So amid some weeping and much adulation, I mounted my black steel steed and tried to hide the hurt in my heart as I pulled out onto the highway, headed south. My plan was to travel to Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, but as I cruised along the hot and lonely roads of Central and South America, I longed for that little Spanish lady of French descent, which I had met in Santiago, La Señorita Coti. 2 months later, when I arrived at the border of Brazil and Venezuela, and the border guard told me I would not pass without a bond of several $1,000s on my motorcycle to prevent me from selling it, well, that was all the excuse I needed. I drove back to Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and sold my bike. I shaved my beard, cut my hair, bought a black suit, a white shirt, a black tie, and an airplane ticket. From there to Mexico City, oh yes, and I tucked the emerald ring that I had bought for her in the salt mines of Colombia deep in my pocket. And when I arrived several days later at the Hacienda de Santiago, I recall standing before those great wooden doors at the entrance and pulling the string to ring the bell above the door. Don Arturo answered as the mammoth puertas creaked open. "Aquí estoy," I said hopefully. "Here I am." "¿Y qué?" he said, glaring at me. "So what?" Well, the rest is history, as they say. I rapidly decided that I would have to convince Mama Lena of my goodness if I was ever going to marry Cody. So I bought her, my mother-in-law, flowers each day, and dressed in my hot black suit, we went to church praying for my chances, and I sat at the dinner table for La Cena, the dinner, each and every night for 6 months, trying to listen and understand the language as the family conversed for hours on end. Finally, Mama Lena told Don Arturo that I was a good boy and that we should invite my parents down to meet them. Well, they came and met and also fell in love with the family, so a date was set. Phew, but that was just the beginning. I needed to get permission from her uncle, Ricardo Ochoa, the Bishop of Colima, and then travel back to Mexico City to obtain permission from the Mexican government to marry a Mexican citizen. Phew, did I know what I was getting into? Nope. But at that point, I didn't care. Anyone who knows me also knows that my only saving grace is my determination. It has saved my life on numerous occasions in settings too distant to describe. But after obtaining all those permissions and standing in line for days on end, finally the day before my wedding, I was stuck in Mexico City with a canceled flight back to Santiago. So I chartered a private plane and nearly died crossing the mountains in a rickety old bywing straight out of some Humphrey Bogart movie. But I made it on time. And that, my friend, was 5 kids, 6 grandkids, and nearly 40 years ago. It wasn't always easy. We had our difficult times. We faced cancer, financial challenges, and lots of struggles, both in and out of the marriage. But somehow that pledge of sickness and in health, along with the image of that face I had seen and loved so many years ago, has kept me going. And has kept us going as well. Adios.